All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mixed Martial Arts. My name is Austin Shaper, and this is a show where we explore the topics of UAP, UFC, and World War III. Today is going to be a UAP, UFO episode. I get mixed up with all these names, UFC, UFOs. Today's going to be a UFO episode, and I want to cover like an hour and 52-minute mashup of both some like B-roll footage of David Grusch along with a long interview that he gave very recently. I think within the last couple of days. It just posted by this, what's his name? I want to say his name is Jesse Michaels. I'm going to post his video in the description of this video so you guys can check it out if you haven't seen it. But basically he did like a mashup of hanging out with David Grusch, and I guess these guys have some sort of relationship going back a few years. And it covers everything from right after the congressional hearing where David Grusch gave testimony, David Grusch being the latest whistleblower from the government who's coming out to allege a lot of things, everything from non-human intelligence to recovered bodies to a secret recovered program where they recover craft, etc., etc. You guys probably know his story. But we've all been waiting with bated breath to see what else David Grusch was going to say after this hearing, which happened almost 2 months ago, I want to say, maybe a month and a half ago, something like that. And I was very curious because I saw this video pop up on Twitter, on UFO Twitter, and right off the bat, I thought it was kind of weird because it was like this independent creator. I don't know anything about him. Maybe you guys do. I'm totally new. I think his name was Jesse Michaels. I'm not 100% sure about that. But I was kind of skeptical because I was like, well, it's kind of weird. He's working with like a content creator. You know, he's not giving another interview to Ross or Jeremy Corbell or one of these like more known UFO investigators. He's going to like this guy on YouTube and doing like a video. They did all kinds of stuff in the video, hung out, and then, like I said, they did like a mashup of, some more interview footage. And not everybody, but a lot of people on UFO Twitter were like kind of up in arms about it, thinking that kind of made David Grusch look goofy and that he was speaking kind of in conspiracy talk and just kind of covering the UFO lore, and that it kind of exposed him as maybe this nerd who just is interested in the phenomenon, but kind of reiterated people's opinions who think that he's lying or that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so I went into this interview video expecting maybe some bad things, expecting like maybe we were going to see more of David Grusch in a bad light, or he's going to say some things that kind of sound a little too far out there, and we're going to sit there and be like, oh, okay, maybe this dude is just kind of like a UFO enthusiast, and that was a bad sign. And, that's not what my takeaway from the video was at all. So I went into it with this kind of like pessimistic attitude because UFO Twitter, while it's very like split down the middle, nobody agrees really on anything. There's always somebody to disagree and argue points, which there's nothing wrong with. But the consensus was in the comments when I saw this video posted was like people kind of disagreeing with it and thinking David Grusch is kind of like a loon. That's not what I took away at all. I thought the video was very good. And first off, the creator, I want to do justice to the work he's done. So I apologize if I got his name wrong. I think it's Jesse Michaels. But off the bat, man, he was like did a really phenomenal job, both in like the editing. He was asking fantastic questions. He clearly knew a lot about the phenomenon. He was very well spoken, and that's it kind of just reiterated my opinion of how I always come on here and say I'm not an expert, and I never want you guys to look at me as some authority about the subject, because I am not that. I'm simply somebody who's fascinated by the phenomenon and is just digging into the truth, trying to figure out what answers we can get about this phenomenon, what's real, what's fake. I'm just investigating, that's all. And when I see people like this guy who came out with this interview, it always reminds me like, okay, it's good that you do not speak from a position of authority, because there's always somebody out there who knows more than I do. Like the late Qui-Gon Jinn from Star Wars said, there's always a bigger fish. And this guy knew a lot more about the physics and the science behind all this than I do. And it was nice to see somebody who didn't speak as if they were a know-it-all. There was plenty of times where he admitted he didn't know, or that he was just theorizing. He had some hypotheses. but that he was, he didn't know anything for certain. And I find that to be very refreshing because, as I state time and time again, I believe in this field, you just get a lot of people who are, as he said himself, snake oil salesmen, and a lot of people who speak in like ultimatums as if they know something for fact. I always bring up as an example Stephen Greer. He just speaks in these ultimatums like he couldn't possibly be wrong, and he's like blessing you with this information, and then he's got this personal connection with the non-human intelligence, and he's here to kind of give us answers. I really dislike that approach. I think that there's very few people in the world who know much about this, and a lot of it is just speculation, and it's refreshing to see somebody who both knows more than I do by a lot, but who also admits they don't know the truth. And so he gave this interview with David Grusch, and I'm going to cover kind of just a few of the topics they discussed. I recommend you guys watch the whole video. It was an hour and 52 minutes, so some people aren't going to sit through the entire thing, so I'll do my best to summarize kind of the brief topics he covered and to let you guys know, did he or did he not reveal anything of substance that we didn't already know from his previous News Nation interview and his previous testimony to Congress. I don't think we got to learn any more answers, really. And as they stated in the interview, and we've heard this 1,000 times, he's very limited in what he can say. He has to basically stick to the information that he put in his written statement to, I want to say it's called DOPSA, the publication who grants people in the government as whistleblowers to be able to speak on certain subjects. He's not allowed to talk about classified things. He's very limited in what he can say, and that pisses off a lot of people. It pisses me off too, but not at David Grusch. It's not his fault. He doesn't want to incriminate himself and reveal something that could imprison him. So I 100% understand the rationale, but obviously on the flip side of that, it is rather frustrating when somebody just alludes to giant cover-ups and crash retrieval programs and bodies and all these things he talks about, but then he can never get into more detail. Kind of reminds me of when Tom DeLonge came on Joe Rogan's podcast a few years back, and Tom would open up this can of worms talking about some really crazy, profound stuff. Joe would kind of try to get him to expound upon the subject he brought up, and then he would shut down and say, "Oh, I can't talk about that." It's obviously very frustrating for people like myself who are very eager for answers, but end of the day, you can't blame Grusch for that. He's willing to testify. He's willing to get into a skiff, and thus far he's been denied from sharing that with members of Congress. He's been denied from being able to open up as much as he'd like to. So there's nobody to blame except the government for the continued cover-up. We didn't learn much. We did learn some things, though. We learned more kind of about David Grusch's opinion of the entire phenomenon as a whole, and I think that's where people really took a hard left on David Grusch from the comments I was seeing on Twitter. They really didn't like him talking about his theories and his ideas and other aspects of the phenomenon he's learned about through other people, I think, like Lou Elizondo and these different people who you know in the field, who we've heard their opinions on it time and time again. People didn't like that. They want to hear the facts. They don't want to hear him kind of give different theories about what he thinks it is. I see no problem with that. And you got to think from his perspective, from David Grusch's perspective, somebody who is uncovering a giant cover-up, the biggest cover-up in the history of mankind, if it is true. Obviously, if you're him and he said he didn't really have an interest in this phenomenon leading up to his uncovering of these secrets. He didn't really care much about it, didn't think much about it. And obviously, it's going to dramatically shift your worldview, and he said as much when he started to uncover these secrets. And one interesting point he did bring up was that, we already knew that he had mentioned, the reason why that he started to really believe that this was going on is that he talked to so many credible witnesses. He said around 40 witnesses and people high up in government, and he kind of talked more about that in the beginning of this episode. And he said that what really alarmed him the most was that people that we would know, recognizable names, he said, very high up recognizable names in government, were coming to him, closing the door in his office and saying, "Listen, man, this is true, and it's absolutely paramount that we keep this secret." I don't know what he said verbatim, but he said along the lines of, like, these guys came to him and said, like, this needs to be kept from the public. And he said some people were visibly shaken when they gave their testimony to him about what they had seen firsthand witnesses. He said they were visibly shaken, and that really alarmed him because these were people that were credible, that he's known for over a decade in the government and who have always been there by his side, both as a friend and a mentor. And Basically he just, remember, this is an intel officer. So at the beginning, this Jesse guy said, is it possible that these guys are duping you? This is some sort of psyop. And he said, of course, I guess it's possible. But he said, if that's true, this would be the most profoundly complex operation they've ever run, and that he should not be an intel officer if it's true, because it's literally his job. It was his career to be able to deduce false from real, and to be able to investigate things and figure out, he knows the government's playbook because he's high up in the government. He had the highest security clearance you can get. You guys know this. So I don't think somebody like that is going to get duped anywhere near as easily as somebody like you and me, who just don't know the answers. We don't have access to the information, the evidence. We've never got to sit and listen to these firsthand witnesses, especially not even close to 40, let alone one. So it was very interesting to see how he spoke about what that interaction was like with people that he found very credible and trustworthy, and people that he said the public would definitely know their names. And he said he couldn't even believe it. He said he couldn't believe when these people came into his office and started talking about this stuff and giving credence and legitimacy to what he was initially uncovering. Other than that, they spoke about a few subjects, some of them being Bob Lazar. Jesse asked him, what's your opinion on Bob Lazar? Did you discover anything new in your investigation? And he said that he did not have anything in the realm of Bob Lazar's story. He could not verify or discredit anything Bob was saying, and it simply was not in the bounds of his investigation. It kind of makes sense. He's covering a lot more recent events. Bob Lazar stuff took place in the 80s. Bob came out in, 1989? So he said it just wasn't in his sphere of information that he was getting, and so he didn't say anything bad about Bob or anything negative. Now, as a little B-roll cut, when they were talking about that, Jesse was speaking about how Bob Lazar, for him personally, it's a mix-up, and he goes back and forth about it. Was Bob telling the truth or not? And he brought up a great point. A few things with Bob's history definitely do bring kind of alarm bells, and sometimes I kind of forget them. And the one thing that kind of really threw me off, I'm going off a little bit on a tangent, but it was in the interview when they talked about Bob. Bob Lazar's relationship to this Lear guy. I forget his first name now. I'm blanking on it. I forget his name. Lear, who is a UFO enthusiast, and his father, I guess, was in some sort of government program. Allegedly, he was in the CIA, and Lear flew planes for the CIA, and so he's got this connection to the government, and him and Bob became friends. At the time, Bob didn't believe in UFOs, made fun of this Lear character, saying that he feels bad for him because he seems like he's a smart guy, but he falls for the UFO stuff. And then, before you know it, Bob is mysteriously working at this place where he uncovers this UFO recovery program and gets to work on the craft. I thought it was really odd, and that came from the Joe Rogan podcast. And I do think if you had to ask me straight up, do I have to give a yes or no, do I believe Bob or not? I still think yes, but definitely I have to admit there are some points with the Bob Lazar story, especially after hearing about this Lear guy and their relationship, that kind of throws a screwball in it for me, because it's, what are the odds? Like, Lear is this UFO enthusiast, meets Bob, they become good friends. Bob says, no, I don't believe in UFOs. And then, next thing you know, Lazar is working in this program, uncovers UFOs, and apparently Lear was even there when Bob took his buddies to look at the test site and to prove to his friends on video that these craft were being flown by humans, and that they were attempting to, have experiments at nighttime in the desert and fly these things around. Lear was there for that as well. So I just don't know what to make of that. I'm open to your guys' opinions, but they did briefly cover that. And David Grusch said he didn't know what to make of the Bob Lazar story. They talked about Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I thought it was pretty cool. David Grusch said he would be willing to debate Neil on this topic, because if you guys follow this phenomenon as closely as myself and others do, you know that Neil deGrasse Tyson's got the weirdest take on this that I've really seen anybody who is like a quote-unquote scientist, researcher. He just completely discredits the thing, says aliens would have absolutely no interest in us. There's no reason why they would even care, and there's no serious evidence. He said that the footage that we've gotten so far could be like birds, flies, insects. He said all kinds of just absolutely ridiculous stuff that somebody who's supposedly a man of science and should be open to the ever-changing and ever-evolving methods of scientific discovery, and he's very close-minded about this topic. Like, I think he has like some major plot holes and gaps in his rationale. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast, and they've talked about it, and Joe has brought it up quite a few times that Neil is like very close-minded about the subject, and just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you're some know-it-all and that you don't have gaps in your thinking and you have some arrogance and ignorance about you. And I think Neil definitely has that. And David Grusch said as much. He said he'd be willing to debate him. He thinks that his opinion about that is just absurd. I agree with him 100%. And then the rest of the video was really just kind of Grusch speaking about his history, how he got involved in the program. He got hired to uncover this to figure out where funds were leaking and being misappropriated. That led him to these near 40 witnesses, and after the accumulation of evidence, this Jesse guy asked him, was there one moment, was there one incident that really just shook you? And David Grusch said not as much one incident. He said there was the accumulation of all these trustworthy, credible people who've been high up in government for decades, who came to him and said, this stuff is real, you really got to look into it, and this needs to be kept secret from the American public. He said it was the accumulation of all this testimony that kind of led him to the understanding that this is real. As hard as it is to believe, there is something real about this phenomenon. What it is, could this be a psyop? It's possible. I think it's one of the least likely options that are out there, but it is possible. You always have to leave that option open. The government is nefarious. The government is tricky. It's always up to something bad. And, as Joe Rogan has been stating as well, he thinks that it's very odd that they're talking about this stuff. Hopefully you guys can't hear this car alarm going off in the background. How annoying. But so it was very odd to hear how he got involved, because one little red flag, I guess you could say, for me was that, he was tasked with investigating this. It wasn't as if he stumbled across it out of nowhere. He was specifically tasked to investigate the UFO phenomenon, and that uncovered the misappropriation of funds, which then led him to the testimonies of these witnesses, and that kind of led him to testifying to the intel community and what's his name, the Attorney General. I forget his official title, but he brought his testimony where he was supposed to, and then obviously gave his testimony also in the congressional hearing. So did we learn much? Not really. Is it worth watching? I do think it is, because you get to see more of his personality, and there is a lot of to speak on the point that I mentioned of the people on Twitter who were kind of saying they didn't like how he kind of is coming out at the gate with all these crazy hypotheses of where these UFOs come from, what these beings are doing. He was very open. I mean, I have no problem with somebody who gets their worldview shattered. He said he had very different religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, whatnot, prior to hearing about this, and then afterwards thinking, there definitely is some sort of higher being, some sort of higher power here. And he kind of just gave his beliefs on what it could be. He was very open-minded and also very quick to say when he didn't have information on something. Just Jesse Guy tried to pin him down on a couple points, such as what could be their motive for viewing us, and what could be their interest in the nuclear facilities. There's so many reports we've heard about these UFOs shutting down our nuclear weapons, hovering around the bases, and having like this keen interest in our nuclear facilities and nuclear power as a whole. And you kind of tried to pin them on what could be the motive. Are they just viewing it as like a zoological experiment, kind of like how we would view, monkeys in a cage? Or do they have some sort of plan? Or are they scared that this nuclear power is the precursor to us to be able to master the same technology they have? And David Grusch was very quick to say he has no information on that, and also it's very difficult to give any theories on intent when we know so little about this non-human intelligence. So I thought it was fine that he was expanding upon these different concepts. It's not as if he spoke that they were fact. He's been very clear about what he says he knows for a fact and what he doesn't know, what he is allowed to talk about, what he's not allowed to talk about. And while that may be frustrating for some people to hear, it did not discredit him in my book at all. He talked about the history he had with PTSD and where that stemmed from, with him being involved in, I think it was Afghanistan, and his buddy losing his life, and then he became suicidal and became an alcoholic and had these issues. I don't think that discredits him either. I think when you go through traumatic things such as war and whatever David Grusch went through in his previous service in the military, it's going to mess you up, and he went and dealt with it. And then they talked about that article from The Intercept that came out attempting to discredit him. And I thought he was very open-minded, very well-spoken, very honest. As I said, it's refreshing to me, somebody who studies this pretty closely and keeps up with all the news. It's very refreshing to see somebody even as high up as David Grusch in the government who can say what he does know, admit when he doesn't know something, then he can go into different theories about what he thinks it could be and how long this phenomenon has been with us, but he doesn't speak as if he knows everything about everything. He knows that there's a lot of secrets that he has not even uncovered. And at the end of the day, we didn't learn that much, except that David Grusch is a credible man. He's a credible witness. He's got the clearances. He's got the history. And if you guys don't believe him, I think you probably wouldn't believe anybody. You probably wouldn't believe anybody who came out and talked about this, no matter their clearance, no matter their position in the government or the military. I don't think you'd probably believe much of anybody, because I don't think history has shown so far that we haven't gotten, I should say, anybody as credible as David Grusch. He's much more credible than even Bob Lazar, and hopefully more people like himself are going to come forward. He spoke about that briefly, said that he encourages these whistleblowers that have not gone public to at least take their testimony to the appropriate places in the government, of which he wants to be a conduit for that. He wants to be a source to be able to represent these people, because he knows it's scary. He knows they're going to get threats in their career, possibly their life, their livelihood, and he wants to represent these people because he believes that there's credible evidence to this phenomenon, and that it's his due diligence as a patriot to be able to share that when he can and in what forms he's able to. I thought it was great. I thought it was really, really good. We're not getting the answers we want. We're not getting them at the rate we want. We want to know, at the end of the day, everything David Grusch knows, right? We don't want to hear this, I can't tell you that, I have to see in a skiff. He said he wants the public to know this, and he thinks it's a crime against humanity to keep this from the public, because it could change everything from the way that the economies work around the world with free energy and different things like that. He talked about that briefly, and also it's just a crime to keep something like this from us, and that he thinks the government's operating in secrecy only opens up the potential for more crimes and more bad things to be brushed under the rug, whereas transparency on the subject is a good thing, and I agree with him. At the end of the day, he doesn't even seem to know the motive for this non-human intelligence, what they're doing here, their purpose. So they could be benevolent, they could be malevolent. We just don't know. David Grusch said as much. We don't know. How can you possibly speak about intent when you don't even have a full deck of cards to operate with? We got like 3 cards, and we're trying to make these full conclusions based off such little compartmentalized information. So thought he was very well spoken on that point as well. At the end of the day, you got to check it out. Let me know your thoughts. He's credible. We're not getting what we want at the rate we want. It's very frustrating. If you follow the subject, it's very frustrating. But at the end of the day, we are making step-by-step little progress. And Jeremy Corbell, in his recent episode of Weaponized, believes that David Grusch is going to have the muzzle off, so to speak. And he's going to be able to speak in, he didn't know what form. He said he didn't know what format, but he does believe that David Grusch is going to be able to give more testimony, more specific testimony at some point soon. So I guess it's just a bit of wait and see. It's kind of always what this leads up to. There's always something on the corner, right, that we got to wait for, or some new discovery. It's very frustrating, but what else can you do? If you're like me and you can't help but be fascinated by this subject and want to know answers, I don't know what the truth of it is. I have literally no idea. In the previous UFO episode I listed out quite a few different options for what this could be, everything from PSYOP to Project Bluebeam to extraterrestrials to future humans to ancient civilization that's been living within the earth, different dimensions. There's so many different aspects to this that are possible. I'm always open to hearing your guys' take, and we just are very far from the truth, I think. I think something big is going to have to happen, some sort of monumental mass sighting, some sort of public disclosure. Something's going to have to give, because this David Grusch testimony is not having the long-term implication thus far. It could change, but it's not having the impact that we would want. It's kind of one of those things where more people in the UFO community are tuned in, but How many people in the mainstream care? Kind of went in the news cycle and then out the news cycle, and we're kind of just left with our hands up going, okay, what comes next? You guys told us a little bit. And there are a few updates that I guess I should cover. They're doing some sort of a bipartisan committee. I think there's like 8 or 9 members that the government just authorized to be able to kind of oversight video and photographic evidence and kind of manage that for the public as more and more evidence becomes declassified. Is that a good thing? I don't know. I think it's a good step in the right direction, but also I read online, don't know if this is true, but I read online that they don't have subpoena power, so at the end of the day, it's not like they're going to be able to subpoena some of these hostile witnesses, as David Grusch puts, witnesses who don't want to be interviewed. They're not going to have the power to subpoena these guys. So is it going to help? Or is it just another Arrow sham, Project Blue Book sham, something to distract the public? You guys know probably Arrow came out with their website. I think it's a bunch of nonsense. I don't really care. I think they've already proven that they're not genuinely interested in the subject. I don't think they're trying to uncover any answers. I think this is just Project Blue Book 2.0, trying to keep the public distracted and kind of convince the public that they are handling this, when in fact, if they are handling it, they sure as hell aren't telling us anything. They're not giving us any answers. They've been around for over a year, and they have yet to say anything about the possibility of this being extraterrestrial, interdimensional life, anything. Nothing about non-human intelligence, no evidence, no verifiable evidence. Kirkpatrick has not come out and said one thing about any of these testimonies, nothing about David Grush's testimony specifically that David Grusch wanted to give to him, nothing about these other whistleblowers who have been sent to Arrow. It's all hush-hush. So I am one of those kind of half glass, half empty guys on this subject, although I am open to being wrong, and that's really what keeps me around, I guess, is the hopes that something is going to change, and things are changing, just not at the rate of speed we would like. So check out the interview. Let me know what you guys think. We'll be back with another episode probably tomorrow or maybe Thursday. So one of those days you guys can expect to check my channel and see something, maybe UFO, World War III, or UFC related. Haven't decided yet. If you guys enjoy this type of content, do me a favor, just click subscribe on the channel. That would mean a lot. I really want to get to 1,000 subscribers so that I can start going live and doing these live chats, but I think you can't do that until you're at 1,000. So right now I'm at like 321, something like that. It would mean the world if you guys kind of help me boost that up. It's something free, simple, and easy you can do in 1 second that I would greatly appreciate it. I come out with this content every couple days, and I love doing it. So if you guys would like to talk about this daily, keep the conversation going. I got a little Discord group called Mixed Martial Arts. I think there's only like maybe 15, 16 members, but it's growing over time. People from all over the place who enjoy talking about one of, or maybe even all of these 3 subjects that I cover. We got 3 subgroups on the Discord page where we ask questions, share breaking news, share our experiences, our opinions on the topics. And yeah, it's just fun to interact and stay in touch with people who are interested in the same stuff as you. So if you guys would maybe like want to grow some friendships and just find another source of information, that would be a good place for you guys to check out. The link to it is in the description of this video. If you're listening to the podcast, the audio only format on the podcast apps, just click follow, leave me a 5-star review. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Are we getting answers so freaking slowly? It's crazy. I just hope it happens in our lifetime. I'll be so pissed if we all die and then like 50 years after that they come out and tell us aliens are real. That would be very frustrating. Let's hope it doesn't happen. Back with another episode soon. Take it easy, Martians. Peace out.